Jack T. Chick, notorious for his Christian Tracts and Crusader comics, the comic book publisher whose Christian Tracts and comics have been condemned for their anti-Catholic views, their anti-gay views, and of course their attacks against feminism and inclusivity. And yet, the artwork from his comic quality. Although not all embrace his philosophy, his work has affected thousands and has been the influence for many cartoonists, writers, and rabid street preachers. But now, as fake news and intolerance have swept the land, is this a laughing matter anymore? Is it possible to separate the man from his art? On this show, I want to talk about Jack Chick. Jack Chick was a man who came out with a number of tracts back during the 60s and 70s that were used by the Jesus People group, fundamentalists, everybody had them. Here's his most popular one, This Was Your Life. This tract here concerns a man who dies, goes to hell, but not before being taken up with an angel and watching a big motion picture about his life that has everything he ever done. And at the end, he gets thrown in the pit of hell, and this book is supposed to convert you. And here's another one. This one's called The Executioner. And this one is about somebody who goes to prison for murder. He's judged, he is given the death penalty, he's got to be killed. But the mother comes and begs, no, don't kill my son. But the law says someone has to die. Note, in Jack Chick's world, the law is not saying the person who committed the crime has to die. Somebody has to die. And guess what? In this tract, he's let free because his mother is executed for his sins. I mean, that would never happen in the real world. Give me a break. But he made millions of dollars making tracts like this, and then eventually he spread out and started producing a number of comic books, like this one, The Broken Cross, which is about witches over near Napa Valley. And then we have this one, The Gift. This one actually takes place near Redondo Beach, California. You can see the Redondo Beach Pier. And this one bears mentioning because it shows a black nurse giving a white drowning victim mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And back during the early 70s, that was considered a big thing. And so this is one reason why people like me and others began to think of Jack Chick as maybe the more laid-back version of Christianity, or the more laid-back version of fundamentalism. As the years would go by, we realized that would not be the case. I wanted to meet Jack Chick. One of the first things I wanted to do, when I first moved to Southern California, I got in the car and took a little pilgrimage to Chino, California. In time, he moved to Rancho Cucamonga, and he lists the addresses, his various addresses on the back of the tract. This is from the Chino, California days. And you'd go in there, and there'd be some racks of some books that were sympathetic to Chick, some books where he actually did the cover, of course, a number of comic books, his latest comic books. But I never got a chance to really see him because he did not want his picture to get out. He didn't want anyone to know what he looked like. So I thought, I'm never ever going to get a chance to meet this guy who really influenced how I tended to view the religious stories. Everything from the Tower of Babel to Semiramis, who's not really a big biblical character or anything, but Jack Chick was fascinated with her because she was referenced by Alexander Hislop's book, The Two Babylons, where Rome, Catholic Babylon, would be Babylon number 2. And it was a notable anti-Catholic work, very popular in Northern Ireland, I would imagine. Everything from the Final Judgment to the Tower of Babel to Sodom and Gomorrah And of course, the way he portrayed the reality was you'd have people doing their normal day-to-day things while angels and demons were fighting over them. I knew someone who said that she was disappointed when she went to a rock concert. She thought that she'd see demons flying in the air, and well, that didn't happen. Well, that's because of Jack Chick. That's where that came from. As the years go by, I kind of mull around in Hollywood, and my biggest claim to fame was being a commentator on Ancient Secrets of the Bible, Part 2, where I commented on the Samson and Delilah story. Now, there's a lot I can talk about that thing, because that Ancient Secrets of the Bible, Part 1, had George Jamal on it, who claimed to have been on Noah's Ark, and it turned out he was not on Noah's Ark. But that's another story, and I'm running out of battery, so I better stick to the subject. I had already done Ancient Secrets of the Bible Part 2, which was hosted by Dennis Weaver, who played McCloud back in the 70s. He was in Duel, Steven Spielberg's first movie, where he was being pursued by a maniacal truck driver. Anyway, he was hosting the program that I was on, which had reenactments of Samson and Delilah. You know who played Samson and Delilah during my reenactment? None other than Aaron Eckhart. He played Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, and he played Samson in my segment. I was told that somebody from Jack Chick's organization would be attending a Christian Broadcaster Association thing that was going on in Anaheim, California. So I got the name of the guy that was going to be from Chick's organization, and I went there, and it turned out because I knew somebody who was working for a ministry that this guy knew, that I was able to get in to see Jack Chick. And what happened was Jack Chick was making a movie based on his years and years and years and years of, drawing various comics like Chaos and Exorcist and The Ark, all of these. And he wanted to turn it into a movie. And he was looking for somebody to help him. And as I was able to brag about being on CBS TV, and I had already made a movie, Bible Madness, and I was making music videos around town, I went to meet him. And it was great. I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Dwayne, this is Jack Chick. I was told about you, and I'd like to meet you." So great. So we set up an appointment, and a few days later, I was in the car driving to, I believe it was Rancho Cucamonga by now, but I was driving there to meet Jack Chick. And when I went in, he was pretty much, actually I didn't know what to expect, so I can't really say he was not what I was expecting. I honestly didn't know what to expect, but he did kind of resemble the professor type roles that you see in some of his comics, gray hair, glasses, and all that. And we went in, and he showed me some cells from his various works to show how these comics were put together. And you could put your finger over them, and you could feel the mountains, and they were really 3D, and that's what gave them the depth. And the person who did this was a man named Fred Carter, who was responsible for the look of the Crusader comics. And I got to see these and got to see what he wanted to put in the movie, and I also saw how he got his inspiration. He had shelves lined with wall-to-wall videos of horror movies and science fiction movies, fantasy movies, movies like Friday the 13th, Halloween, whatever latest sci-fi movie might have been in vogue at the time he had. And as somebody who grew up in a fundamentalist place that circulated chick tracts, that believed it was wrong to go to movies, well, that was a little bit of an interesting revelation. But what made it more interesting was at some point, I just kind of dropped a little bit of pretense, and I just wanted to know some personal answers. And one person I wanted to talk about was John Todd, who was a major figure behind the Broken Cross. John Todd was one of the first people who was responsible for the satanic panic that was happening around that time, where people were seeing ritual abuse around every corner. And Jack Chick Comics had a lot to do with that. Where I mentioned I had moved to Southern California at the time the McMartin preschool trials were going on. And they were alleging that the people who operated the McMartin homes were digging a tunnel that went all the way to Hollywood, where they would have these satanic rituals with none other than porn star John Holmes. Obviously, that's easy to disprove, but why in the world were millions of dollars spent on this trial? It was a satanic panic, and people like Jack Chick and Geraldo Rivera bear some responsibility for that. But the last thing I cared about when I met him was holding him responsible. This was the man responsible for how I viewed theology and probably ultimately the world. And as we talked, he said he didn't know, what happened to John Todd, what turned him that way. He believed that John Todd was telling the truth about being involved with his satanic family, which included Barnabas Collins. No kidding. John Todd believed that he was descended from an actual Collins family that was the inspiration for Dark Shadows. And people bought it and people sent him money. John Todd was arrested for having sex with a minor. He went to prison. A short while after he got out of prison, John Todd died. But Jack Chick still kept pumping out his works, even though he was considered to be a fraud. Well, I left, and ultimately I didn't get the job. Jeremiah Films got the job. And if I thought that that movie was going to be Jack Chick's swan song to conspiracy theories, boy was I wrong. I did go to the premiere of the movie, which was held in Ontario, in a little college town, and I didn't see Jack Chick there, but there was a big crowd. And he went into his anti-Catholic best. You saw pictures of the Pope being controlled by Satan and all that. I believe this was a public college that we were watching this movie in, but at the end of it, all I could do was just leave and just go, well, I certainly don't endorse what he writes about, but I can separate the man from the art and appreciate his art. As the internet became a part of our private lives, I had mentioned on a few message boards about my meeting with Chick, and then finally a man named Dan Rayburn got in contact with me, and he wanted to do an interview about it because he wanted to put it together in a zine called The Imp. And I agreed. After all, I didn't get the job, so I wasn't exactly bound by a confidentiality oath. The Imp came out, and I thought it was a very thorough look at the world of Jack Chick. And there's been other works that have come out that have looked at the world of Jack Chick. And there are some articles out there online that actually talk about my meeting with Jack Chick and what I've shared with you today. But there is a more important question that I must answer. And that is, at the time I was able to divorce the man from the art. All these years later, as fake news dominates our headline, am I still able to do that? In some ways, Jack Chick is grandfathered in. I mean, he does have some redeeming qualities, like remember when I mentioned about the black woman giving the white woman mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in the 70s in his comic book, The Gift? Well, okay, give him a thumbs up for that. But then in the later years, I remember walking into Chick's office and seeing tapes and books that went against gay rights. And this was very conspiratorial. He was alleging that there was a conspiracy of gay people out there trying to put AIDS in the blood supply. And this would be on books that would have pictures of Martin Luther King with the caption, "Not a part of my dream," when if you do your own research into this, you'll find that Martin Luther King did indeed endorse gay rights and civil rights for gays and for everyone, but not in Jack Chick world. And that caused me to wince a bit. And when I see how prevalent fake news is, I realize that I can't really give any artist who are like Jack Chick the kind of respect that I used to give to Jack Chick. I mean, take the guy that does these Norman Rockwell-like paintings of Donald Trump riding on a motorcycle. You know, it's great artistry. I'll give him that. He's got a talent. But I don't think I want to glorify that person. I'm not even going to look him up to see his name. But Jack Chick was a part of my childhood. And Some things just don't go away. The question is, are we able to look back and discern the good and the bad, and are we able to dispense with the bad? But I think it's to the point where the bad outweighs the good. Jack Chick died, but his organization is still active. So I would not give these out to anyone without a very long-winded conversation like the one I had with you today. So although it's interesting, in my movie Bible Madness, my characters are indeed handing out Chick tracts. Thank you for watching Pop Culture Paradox. And if you liked what you see, please subscribe to this channel and like this video and come back for more.